Probably the most important person, at least early on in my life, who set a pattern for a non-wasted life was my father, Bill Piper. He was an evangelist. He's still living as we make this video. But in those days, he was a vibrant evangelist who preached. And I would get to hear him preach in the summer times, sometimes because I would travel with him, and he would have these illustrations that would rivet the heart of a little 10-year-old boy. And I remember one in particular that set the stage for this book, Don't Waste Your Life. He was talking about a crusade that he preached in, and how toward the end of an invitation one night, as people were coming to the front, an old man that they had been praying for in this church for a long time walked to the front, weeping, I don't know how old, in his 70s or 80s, I suppose, and sat down on the front pew. And when most people had gone, my father finally got to him in counseling and just tried to discern what was wrong. And the man, with his face in his hands, said, as he looked back over his life, "I've wasted it. I've wasted it." It's amazing the impact that had on me as a little boy, to sow the seeds in my heart. I never, ever want to come to the end of my life and say that. I don't want to waste my life. And it's interesting that we had this plaque. It was on the kitchen wall just above the sink all the time I was growing up, at least from the age 6 to 18. It was there, and it said, "Only one life, 'twill soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last." And it had a little green hill painted on a black background with a little brown painted path up over the hill, disappearing off into the future. And I would read it and I would say, only what's done for Christ will last. I want my life to have a lasting impact. What's just over that hill for me? Because when I was in high school, I felt so incompetent in so many ways. I look back on this 1964 Trevilian. That's the year I graduated from high school. And think about what's in here. My high school years were not, by and large, happy years. I wanted to be happy. I knew that above all things. But I was so nervous. I couldn't speak in front of a group, and I had pimples on my face, and I didn't think anybody, especially girls, could like me. And so I became pretty introspective and pensive, which was hard at the time. But as I look back on it, I think it was a gift from God that He was saying, you will focus on what matters. You won't focus on the fast lane or the party life or being liked or being a great sports star. You're going to say, what counts? What will last? So I head off to college, and in those days, I went off to college in 1964, graduated in 68, and existentialism was in the air. And you can sum existentialism up in 2 words. Existence, I guess it's 3 words. Existence before essence. Meaning, you don't start with a God-given essence of who you are and then try to live out of that essence in a meaningful, significant life that conforms to what you're made to be. Rather, there's no God and there's no essence. You create who you are. And what you do and how you exist determines and defines your meaning. And so freedom is the essence of things. And I can remember the talk of meaninglessness at the college I went to and how many people were into existentialism. I remember going to a play called Waiting for Godot, G-O-D-O-T, and it really was God. And it is just 2 people in barrels for the whole play waiting for a man to show up. He never shows up, and that's the end of the play. And the whole point was God never shows up. He doesn't exist. There is no meaning in the world. We're all waiting. And the Beatles, of course, were big, and they had a song, what was it? The Nowhere Man. He's going nowhere. He's got no ideas. He doesn't know what he's doing. Isn't he a lot like you and me? But there were for me anyway, it was so important that there were other voices. Even at the pop level, there were other voices. And you wonder sometimes, why did anybody listen to Bob Dylan? I mean, what a terrible voice. And yet everybody was riveted on the times they are a-changin'. And the one that must have absolutely maddened the existentialist, the answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. And the word in that little phrase that makes so much difference is the word the. Not any old answer is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. It's out there. Existentialism is just dead wrong. It's not what you make of the world. The world exists outside of me. If I drop dead, the world goes on. I need to figure out what's out there. I need to believe in objectivity that's outside of me. And so along in 1965, along comes Francis Schaeffer. Long hair, funny collar, funny vest, knickers, and he couldn't pronounce the word reality. He was always talking about reality. And we loved him. He came to the Wheaton College Chapel and he gave the lectures of the book, The God Who Is There. Just the very title absolutely took me. The God Who Is There. Existentialism was saying, no, if he exists at all, it's you. It's in here, and you create him, and you make life, and here comes this knicker-wearing, long-haired, reality-pronouncing philosopher and says, he's out there. Life is out there. Reality is out there. Find what's out there and conform your life to that, and you might not waste your life. So Francis Schaeffer was absolutely crucial for me. And there was another player in this scene in my head, and he died in 1963, same day that John F. Kennedy was shot, namely C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis, for one simple reason, there were many, but for one in particular, riveted me and helped me get outside my subjective, self-conscious, existentialist influenced self to what's out here. He used the word quiddity. Quiddity comes from the Latin quid, this, and it means the thisness of life. That there's a tree, and you shouldn't just talk about the abstract notion tree, you should talk about oak trees. And you shouldn't just talk about oak trees, you should talk about the oak tree in my front yard as I was growing up. And you shouldn't just talk about the oak tree that's in my front yard as I was growing up, but the one with the gnarled brown bark in which you carved your initials when you were lonely one afternoon as a 12-year-old. That's the quiddity, the thisness. Things get concrete. And he could paint reality and the beauty of life in such a way that you came alive to it. You realize you're made for something outside yourself. And then along came a friend of his, G.K. Chesterton. Actually, they didn't live at the same time, but he loved Chesterton. And Chesterton said things like, the amazing thing about people's funny noses is not that the noses are funny, but that they have noses at all. And when he said things like that, I thought, why am I so blind? Why am I so wrapped up in this head, worried about me and how I come across? Why can't I see a nose on somebody's face and say, that's awesome. Look at what's on your face, and be so fascinated by reality outside of me that I could enjoy what God had made and ultimately enjoy the ultimately objective, namely God himself. Those were wonderful days, and a fiancé is a stubbornly objective fact. She's out there, she's real, she's changed everything in here precisely because she's not in here. That's a parable of God. God is out there. He changes everything in here because he's not of my own creation. He's objective. What I was discovering in these days was that to not waste my life, I had to get outside myself. I had to realize there's objectivity. Ultimately, behind that objectivity is God himself as the ground of all of it. And then I got mono in the fall of 66, flat on my back in the hospital, the health center, for 3 weeks, listening on the radio, WETN, to John Harold Ockenga. No, it's Harold John Ockenga. I always get those backwards. Preaching in the chapel, and everything in me was loving what he was doing. He was finding meaning in texts outside his brain, putting them in words that were riveting and powerful, and he was speaking them to a couple thousand Wheaton students, and I was sick, thinking I was going to be a pre-med medical student, and everything changed. I fell in love with the Bible. I wanted to go to seminary. All that I'd been experiencing of Lewis and Schaeffer and Chesterton and Ockenga and the books I was reading were saying, you got to find meaning outside yourself in something authoritative. You better get to know the Bible. And so I was off to seminary, but I think I had discovered one of the most essential lessons of my life, that in order not to waste my life, I've got to get outside of me. I've got to see and embrace the ultimately objective, because I'm made for something outside of me. And ultimately, I found it to be God. Father, I simply ask that those who are listening, watching, would taste the beauty of your objective, magnificent, outside of them reality. I pray that people would be able to get outside their self-consciousness and their worry about how they look and how they're coming across, and can be utterly raptured, enamored, thrilled by objective reality, ultimately yourself, revealed in Jesus Christ, manifest on the cross, dying for their sins, rising again, being the great and glorious God that you are. I ask this in Jesus' name.